something had a Wurlitzer. And it was this sound that just like, you know, rang out. And I said, this is for me, this is it. I found where I want to be. I thought it was a magical golden place. I was class of 1980.
Jim Kronzer has some pretty good memories of high school.
These books have not been cracked in many, many years.
When he was just 14, he left Virginia Beach and moved to Goochland County.
Oh, there I am.
That's where Jim attended St. John Vianney Prep Seminary, an all-male Catholic school high on a hill above the James River.
I think I was toying with the idea of priesthood.
But while thumbing through his old yearbooks, the difference between Jim's freshman photo and his sophomore self comes into focus.
Stuff has happened to this kid. So this is the kid who was abused.
On February 13th, the Catholic Diocese of Richmond published a list of names on its website. More than 40 members of the clergy accused of sexually abusing children. In each case, the bishop said the allegations were found to be credible and substantiated. Some of the names were familiar.
Now and forever. Amen.
In the early 2000s, CBS 6 covered a number of cases involving priests suspected of molesting kids.
He baptized my children. He's part of our family, and it's really sad what's happened.
One of the cases involved a Henrico priest named John Leonard. He ended up being charged and convicted of abusing 2 teenagers, crimes committed when Leonard was the headmaster at St. John Vianney in the late 1970s.
And so it was a small community, and it was run by 4 priests.
And 3 of them were included on the list released by the diocese. In addition to Leonard, there was Father Stephen Randy Rule. And who's that?
That's Julian B. Goodman.
The priest who had abused Jim Kronzer. Jim says the bond was almost immediate and grew so strong that Goodman even became a friend of the family.
He did vacation with us once.
The young priest and his student shared a love of music and the arts.
Even to this day, I'll hear, it's like, oh, I remember listening to that on his record player, in his office.
But it was there, behind closed doors, where the abuse took place.
It was touching. It was inappropriate touching. And it would be in his private quarters, usually watching TV. There was some kind of distraction, both of us sitting on the sofa. It became very clear to me that this was not right.
The abuse only stopped when St. John Vianney closed its doors in 1978 after Jim's sophomore year. Like many victimized by priests, he never went to the police. But he eventually spoke out. Next, what inspired Jim to privately contact the diocese nearly 20 years after he was abused, and what happened in the early 2000s that made him decide to go public with his story.
This was something that I didn't reveal to anybody until many years later when I was in my 30s.
Jim Kronzer first contacted the Richmond diocese in the mid-1990s and told them that he had been molested by a priest when he was a young teenager.
They expressed remorse, they expressed sorrow for what happened to me. I asked them to help cover the costs of my therapy.
Jim also requested a face-to-face meeting with his abuser.
He was very sorry, is what he said to me. It was kind of hard to watch. He was a shell of a man that I knew.
Jim got the closure he needed and life went on until 2002 when he stumbled across an article that stated no priest currently serving in the Richmond diocese had any confirmed incidents of sexual misconduct with children. Jim knew that had to be false. In fact, at that time, Julian Goodman was the pastor at a church in Charlottesville.
I contacted the Diocese of Richmond and I said, hey, we have a problem.
This time, Jim wanted the church to publicly admit what had happened to him. and he would help craft that confession.
It wasn't some side room deal. It was like, all right, now we're going to write a press release together.
The day before this was released, Bishop Walter Sullivan forced Goodman to resign.
I felt cared for by an institution that had, by an institution that held an individual that damaged me. They took responsibility.
It's not easy for Jim Kronzer to talk about his past and the innocence that was stolen from him. But in the wake of the list and the meetings about sex abuse that are taking place at the Vatican, he feels that it's necessary.
I believe that people like me give courage to others. This is an old problem.
Despite the horrible things that happened to him, Jim says his brief time at St. John Vianney helped shape the man he has become.
I discovered my line of work, which is theater. That was one of the beautiful things that came out of that, and it's still my profession to this day.
But his memories of those 2 years will always be equal parts joy and pain.
I'll never get back the kid that walked into that seminary optimistic and emboldened by something new in his life that was supposed to be really kind of amazing.
Jim Kronzer says he does not personally plan to take legal action against the church or Julian Goodman, but he is willing to talk to Virginia's Attorney General, who announced last year that he was investigating clergy sex abuse. The diocese says that Goodman is still alive, but our attempts to reach him have been unsuccessful. Working for you, Laura French, CBS 6 News.